So we're up for a bit of a shift change now. The last two sessions have talked about search engine optimization. We're going to take a little bit more of a holistic view now and look at how you can maximize your digital marketing efforts across mobile. And here to talk to us about that today is Serge Milbank. Serge is Joint Managing Director at Stream20 and is going to be talking to us today about how to market your mobile presence. So please welcome Serge to the stage.
Great. Afternoon, everybody. Just today I'm going to present some data on some research that we've done in terms of implementation of mobile marketing, and then I'm going to use that and talk you through the tactics you need to do and the strategies you need to do to actually implement an effective mobile marketing program. Just very quickly about Stream20. Today, or not today, actually tomorrow is our eighth birthday. So we're a consultancy. What we do is we go into the client side, we work inside organisations, we understand what your KPIs are, where you need to drive, what your number is in terms of his acquisition, retention, churn reduction, etc. And we put teams inside that organisation and we help you push those numbers up. So the business itself kind of focuses in four key areas of work. First one's delivery. So these are teams that actually go inside organisations and actually go and push the numbers up. That might be in display, email, mobile, whatever channel that's necessary. We do planning, so we help organisations write budgets. We help them write strategies. We help them structure strategies so that they can actually improve what they're doing. Toolkit, which is about rolling out marketing technology. And organisations, so we help organisations structure themselves well to be successful, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that today as well. We've just recently opened a San Francisco office to service some of our global clients, and we operate pretty heavily around Europe as well. Just a quick look at the kind of clients that we work with. It's the first thing to note about is it's a pretty wide spread. And that spread's interesting for us because we know that what's going on in one industry can help another industry. And where best practice is actually being pushed ahead in some verticals, we can use that information and help another vertical to improve what they're doing. Interestingly, our business is really focused around pushing numbers up. And I think probably in the last 2 years, the number of mobile briefs that we've been working on is by far the majority of the work that we're doing inside the organisation, because people need to find out and to structure how to do what they're doing and how to improve what they're doing going forward, and to have a structured plan around it. Right, enough about us. Let's talk about I want to talk very quickly, just as a framework for us, about my little theory on when digital is interesting and when it's boring. Interesting is kind of when there's fundamental shifts going on, where big new capabilities and technologies are coming into the market, and you can use that to draw in customers in a totally different way to the way it's been done before. Kind of boring is when everybody's using the same technology, and it's really about who implements stuff better and who's doing marketing better than someone else. And there's a pretty stark difference between the two, I think. And to put that in context, I just wanted to show you, this is the NASDAQ index, and I'm going to map out my career in digital, just so you can understand what I've seen is when there's been boring periods and when there's interesting periods. So, initially, that was kind of in the 90s. We were building websites, we did a little bit of email, we did a little bit of SEO, and that's kind of at an industry level, that's what was going on, that's what we were doing. And that was very interesting because no one knew what was going on, and everyone was just learning the new approaches to go through. Then it got boring. So around about the dot-com boom, when everyone was just throwing money in, and really what they were doing is the same thing as what was happening before, but there's a lot more spam, a lot more black hat activity, and really not much substance to the way that digital marketing was being done. Then when it all came crashing down, it actually got interesting again, because at that phase you had, online marketing actually happened. You could actually market your mobile presence. And so all of a sudden, paid search, CPA in the context of display was there, affiliates actually came on board. ECRM, as opposed to just smashing out emails, blasting out emails, became part of the core of what you're doing. Then it got boring again. And that was basically people were doing effectively the same thing. Brand bidding came on, a few different display ad formats came in, lots of link building, lots of SEO link building that went on, and that was, in a way, boring. Then it got interesting again, and it's the whole point of this slide is actually it got interesting again because consumers started taking up mobile. And that's the key thing, is all of a sudden mobile becomes a viable channel to capture customers in. And it's a pretty important moment in the time because actually there's a fundamental shift happening in the way that people are behaving. They're moving from PCs to smartphones. They're moving from PCs to tablets. They're using smart TVs as well. And there's a whole range of other connected devices in there. And the way that you market to these groups, the people that are using these tools, is totally different to the way that was actually done before. So it represents a fundamental shift. I'm going to show you, String20 does a benchmarking study, and we measure across 29 core areas in digital marketing. And we survey our client base and we survey the wider market out there to understand how well people are implementing email, social, user experience, mobile web and mobile apps, which is what I'm going to talk about today, but also things like forecasting, acquisition strategies, ad servers, etc. So we measure across the whole board, and there's people that have implemented really well and there's people that have implemented really badly. The people that have implemented really well are getting ahead of the game. And what it does is the benchmarking exercise, when you measure yourself against it, you can get a pretty good feel as to what you need to do next, if that makes sense, in terms of your digital activity. So if I have a look at what we've done in mobile, or what we've measured in mobile, the first thing to note is we score on a scale of sort of 1 over to 5, and sort of average is in the kind of the middle area, which is, and then you've got a kind of advanced area. Now the key thing in terms of people implementing mobile processes, technology, marketing activity, etc., they're kind of halfway there, if that makes sense. So of all the things that you could be doing in marketing, as a general industry of people in digital, really half of it's probably getting implemented at any given time. I'm going to go through these in details, but site development's probably the second most advanced in terms of actually what people are doing. Strategies are a bit behind, tracking's okay, data's a bit of a mess. Not many people are actually identifying who their customers are in terms of whether they're mobile customers, whether they're smartphone or tablet customers. Promotion's pretty low, which I can talk a lot about, and creative as well. So just to give a context there, if we have a look at that spectrum from kind of 1 all the way up to 5, if we have a look at the mobile site and tracking analytics, the results pretty much speak for themselves in terms of a lot of people have responsive mobile sites up. What they don't have is adaptive sites that are personalising to the people's user experience. And that is an opportunity for you to get ahead. If you can get your site up to that level, which I'm sure lots of people talked about already, you will get yourself ahead of the game. In terms of analytics, most people are using the basic analytics that are out there. Or that's the basic analytics. They're using the wider site analytics, and they're using that data to understand what's converting, what's not, etc. in that context. What's not being used, what data points aren't being pulled in, is location data. A whole host of other elements about the nature of the inbound traffic that's coming in as a result of the mobile channels and other channels that aren't mobile, to bring them into the mobile space. Now that's all well and interesting, but what we found, I think, over the course of this year, 2013, is across our client base at least, about between 20% and 50% of their traffic is now mobile. So that's smartphones or tablets together. Now, we've actually started, we're talking to our clients a lot about this almost 2 years ago, when it was more like the 10 to 20%. And when it was there, like, they were all going, oh, crikey, what's quarter of our traffic almost is mobile. This year, it's actually something closer to around 50%, which is quite a big figure. And in terms of people's readiness, in terms of what we showed before, that's a problem. And the most telling statistic underneath that is often we're finding, for people that are kind of in that middle range, is the conversion rate to new customers, or the conversion rate to purchase, is often 50% lower via mobile. And the reason for that is people aren't ready. People aren't implementing what they need to do to get ahead of the game. So all of a sudden, there is quite a big scramble, particularly in the big corporates, to move to try and get these kind of things covered off. So again, if you can get ahead of the game in that area, you'll do very well. One thing I wanted to talk about was what we've noticed over the years is, particularly in the bigger corporate space, is the marketing department and the product department, the tech department that's actually building the product, the online product or the web product, the mobile site, etc., two separate teams. Now, what's interesting about that is one role is to build, the other role is to build to drive traffic in. Now, what we've known for years is if that traffic comes up against the wall and doesn't convert terribly well, there's no point to actually driving the traffic in the first place. And so what we tend to found over the years is actually, you put your requests in for improvement, it hits the work stack, and then nothing, you might see a change in 3 months or even 6 months, depending on, how engaged the product team or how much resource they have in that framework. What we're seeing for the ones that are actually been successful, particularly in mobile marketing, using a growth marketing approach, which is actually the marketing teams and the product teams are merging. So what I mean by that is actually those two teams are actually starting to work together to actually solve problems in that framework, as opposed to being separate teams, throwing something over, being in the same building, or actually working to the same KPIs in that framework as well. Now, what does that actually look like in terms of actually a mobile marketing operation? Is you've got a marketing team that's doing traditional marketing outputs. You've got a product team that's actually working on product improvement. But then you've got a kind of a collective team here that's starting to be termed a growth team. And that growth team is focused on their technical marketeers. They're far more technical. They've got a much more tech-savvy approach to the way that they actually go about their marketing. They're working with developers inside those teams. So those developers are actually reporting into the technical marketeers, and they're implementing processes and systems and activity that actually impacts the marketing KPIs. And that's a fundamental shift in the way that actually people are actually functioning on the client side. And I'd argue that if you don't have that set up at the moment, particularly in your mobile marketing presence, it's something you should consider. Right, jumping on to promotion. This is probably the core of what we're going to be talking about a lot today. The benchmark group is 2.4 out of 5, so roughly 50% of what could be done in marketing is actually implemented. And what that really means in words is basically people are marketing their mobile site through maybe 1 or 2 media channels only. So there's 1 or 2 media channels driving the mobile number, as opposed to quite extensive multi-channel marketing to actually drive some heavy volume into those areas. And that's pretty fundamental there, because what's happening is people are building mobile sites, and when I get onto apps, people are building apps, but they're actually pushing volume into them to actually drive business value. There's not that many people actually doing that as much as they could. So again, big old opportunity. If you start to build up your mobile channels, marketing channels into your mobile sites that are hopefully converting well, because you've got the product teams and marketing teams working well together, you're going to get yourself ahead. Data's probably even worse, not significantly worse, but it's in a position where a lot of organisations do not know that certain customers are mobile customers and certain customers are PC-based customers and certain customers are tablet-based customers. And that makes a significant impact. If you know that someone's consuming your product via a mobile device or purchasing your product via a mobile device, they behave fundamentally differently to someone on a PC, to someone on a smart TV, to someone on a tablet. So it's a core thing. The people that can get the data side of things right will get well ahead of the game. Right, jumping into mobile channels. What I've got here is I've just kind of listed out all the mobile channels you have at your disposal. Bear in mind that the majority of organisations are running with 1 or 2 channels driving in volume. But what you have is you've got organic search, paid search, mobile ad networks, social media, email marketing, good old email marketing, affiliate marketing, content marketing, and aggregators, all of which you could be driving volume into your mobile site. On top of that, you've got QR codes, which I've been honest, I'm not much of a fan of, bluecasting, SMS and MMS, still a massive volume driver for a lot of organisations. And then all the traditional offline channels. And there are quite a few offline channels that are actually becoming quite effective for mobile. Tube advertising being one that's actually quite effective because everyone's on the tube, they've got nothing else to do other than play with their smartphones. So you've got all these channels to play with. Enablers as well is the one thing that you have in mobile is the enablers you have fundamentally different. In particular, you've got localization. You've got, and I'll talk a little bit about localization later on, but you know, all the other device capabilities, if you can use the other device capabilities, things like cameras, the gyroscope, etc., if you can start to use those in your mobile marketing, it's going to improve your conversion. Right, so this slide, this is a process by which you can start to build up your mobile marketing. So I'm going to kind of start from the bottom. If we just assume that's your mobile website, you've got a mobile website. You can also convert people via a website. You convert people by a mobile app, and you can probably even convert them in a retail space. And if we want to get even further, we can go into call centres as well. The first thing that you need to do is use those enablers I mentioned on the previous slide to actually make sure that that's going to assist what you're doing in conversion. Next layer up, which is probably the most important, is what you do first, is you work in pull channels. Now, pull channels are all about capturing existing demand that's out there in the marketplace. People are, the best examples, people are searching on Google. People are searching on Google for your brand. People are searching on Google for your product category in generic terms. There's affiliates that are hanging around there itching to try and sell something. There's aggregators that are comparing different things. There's SEO, which is organic search, which is, again, just capturing people already in the marketplace for whatever it is that you're selling. And it's just a matter of actually opening up those channels. They should be highly cost-effective channels for you. So if all the things that you would start first, start in this area. Because once you've done that, then you've got people that are kind of in that consideration stage in the funnel where these are people that are already engaged. They've visited your site, so maybe you can retarget to them. Maybe they've liked you on Facebook or followed you on Twitter, etc. So all of a sudden you've got an opportunity to re-engage with them. Then you've got email. Maybe they've opted in, and you can start to email the base to start to drive additional volume as well, particularly repeat visitation, repeat purchase. Most businesses would take a couple of years to get this right before they even start to drive additional volume through push channels. So, with the exception of maybe content delivery, but then there's display advertising. You can use external email addresses to push volume through, and start to work in the framework of SMS, and then moving over into offline channels. But the key point here is actually the process by which you start your mobile marketing activity is start and understand where you're going to convert them. Maybe you're not going to convert them on the web. Maybe there's a different strategy that you're going to take. But if you were to convert them on the web, on the mobile web, then you're going to start on these channels first because they're the cheapest, they're the most cost effective, and in some instances there is no media cost, and that's where you can start to drive some good volume before you start to move over into these other areas as well. Right. Now the last bit, just on the mobile side, in terms of creative, scoring 2.8, so again hovering around that 3 mark, where basically the mobile site kind of ties into the wider user experience that actually happens inside a wider brand. Now, what I always say to organisations, particularly if 50% of their traffic is going through the mobile site, you've then got to start to ask your question, should your mobile site follow your brand, or should your brand follow your mobile site? Is your mobile site becoming your brand? And if it is, should that not lead your brand? And if that's the case, then that's a fundamental shift, and actually starting to lead in those frameworks. And some people are starting to move in that. So, for example, the gaming industry is an example. If you start to see all the TV ads that are out there for some pretty high-end gaming apps that are out there for all the major gambling companies, they're recognising That's their brand now, as opposed to a website, as opposed to a retail presence. Because, again, the majority of volume is going through those channels. What we're also noticing as well is people, they have a mobile strategy in place, but it's focused on maybe on one device. You know, right, we're going to do well in iOS, or we're going to do well in Android. There's no wider, broader actual strategy plan that's in place for a roadmap for what's going to happen over the course of the next couple of years. Now that's very hard to predict what's going to happen in the course of years, but at least to have a laydown, to have a structured plan that allows you to change it in a structured manner. Right, moving on to apps. So I'm actually not going to go into the detail of these apps because there's not that much time, but you can sort of see here, apps is considerably lower. If we were hovering around the 3 mark in some of the better areas of mobile web, it's hovering significantly lower in the app space. So you've got the actual distribution of apps in the app stores. You've got tracking into apps and understanding conversions, installs, etc. The promotion, again, using not that many channels to drive it. Data, people aren't, it's not linked to any kind of wider database inside the organisation. Creative strategy in the development cycle, again, is of all the things that could be implemented in the app space, only a smaller portion of what can be done is actually implemented. So, okay, it's all very negative, but that's one way to look at the half-empty way of just describe the half-full way is, look, if you're a brand and if you have a good app strategy in place and you're implementing well, you can get well ahead of the competition because there's not a lot of there's instances at the top of the kind of the group that are actually doing extremely well, and there's a lot of instances around the bottom where there's not much of a strategy around it. It's not being implemented well. So if we then diversify out, and what I've added to this slide is apps. So, and these are app marketing channels. So we've got all the mobile marketing channels we discussed earlier. We've got all the offline channels. We've got the enablers. If we start to have a look at apps, there's lots of different channels that are starting to evolve that you can actually start to use to drive volume. So, app stores, there's more than 2. App recommendation sites, there's plenty out there that are actually going out there and recommending what are the best apps and what are good apps and what are not. Pay-per install networks, so you can pay to get an app installed and pay on that basis as well. App giveaway sites where they work to the freemium model. They'll give you a free trial of something and then you upgrade in that context. Preload, so preloading actually onto devices. Push notifications, which is a new CRM channel. So with an app, everyone's seen the little push channels that come up. That can be managed in the same way that email can be managed. So big opportunity in that space. There's a whole, anyone in the CRM who starts using those channels start to realise they've got a whole new channel to play with, where they didn't have before, where they were just messing around in email for too long. I'll put Facebook app install ads as a separate thing because, as opposed to pay-per install networks, is the largest volume driver for app installs now is Facebook, and they've got specific ads for it. That used to be on CPC and CPM. Now it's actually doing on a pay-per install, and that's a big volume driver for a lot of people that are actually actively pushing apps. And then there's app to app. So the most basic one is going from a free version to a paid version, but there's also moving over into Passbook, into Apple Passport, but then I expect there'll be a lot of integration from app to app over the course of the next couple of years. So again, you've got, most people out there are using 1 or 2 channels to drive volume inside mobile, but look at the opportunity you've got. It's a massive amount of things that you could be doing in mobile, and that's evolving and changing every week. Presenting this, a similar set of slides to this a year ago, half of these weren't here. So there's new products that are coming onto the market frequently. So that's an unordered list that kind of says what you could be doing. So what? Let's have a look at let's try and structure that a little bit. If we look at how the app ecosystem works, is there's discovery, people install an app, they might use it, and then they might actually purchase. Sometimes you might bypass and they go straight to purchase, but more often than not, it follows that kind of journey. Now, if you layer on the channels, in terms of what's there, that's the role of these different channels at the moment. Now, it's not hard and fast. Different channels drive into different areas, so it varies, but you can sort of see, they're all driven to get to app install. But everyone talks about it. If you go and have a look in the literature, there's a kind of a so what. You've got the first kind of 24 hours that's crucial to try and get them to use it, to get them to use it effectively, and then get them to purchase it. And that's pretty key, but you haven't got that many channels to really play with. Really what you've got is you've got your product. And bear in mind what we talked about before, if you've got the product team that is kind of building away and they're not focused on these stages, then as a marketeer you're going to have some problems. So there's a lot of need to start to focus on these areas. So what if we then layered in all the other channels that you have at your disposal as well? So there's not that you've got plenty of opportunities here to try and drive volume here, but you can start to pull in your engagement channels to drive from install to usage. So making sure that you're collecting registration data, making sure you're retargeting, making sure you're using social channels to engage people, to try and push them over into usage. And then, naturally, this is probably less relevant, but there's certainly any number of affiliates that are quite happy to get you to try and go to a paid type framework. But I guess the key thing is there's a framework to layering it up. Talked about with mobile web, you can start on the pull channels in this area, and then you start to build up. But you've got these, and there's the install. But that is the most crucial part for the marketeer. If you can get that right, you'll start to drive significant volume. Right, I've kind of been talking a lot about enablers and talking a lot about the marketing and product teams working together. But mobile has a lot of opportunities to do new things and new and interesting things. And it's, in particular, localization. Localization, your mobile could tell, your mobile could tell a marketeer where someone is. And if you know where someone is, you can then impact the way that they're going to behave at a certain time. And hopefully, that's the kind of thing that pushes up conversion quite a lot. All the other things we talked about with conversion tracking, which is crucial, making sure the analytics is bang on, which is also crucial, making sure that you're using data that you know about them. All that data is really vitally important to kind of drive things up. But the one other thing I wanted to mention then is, in that context, actually, the product itself, where the product can market for you. And I think using social, everyone talks about social and mobile working really, really well together. And it's particularly important, right? Because if you've got an app and you tell a friend about that app, and that friend uses that app, and those two apps are you're talking to your friends on those apps, that's marketing. So it's about bringing those two together. But it's more than just marketing now. It's actually marketing the product. The product is marketing, which a lot of people talk about these days. But what you can then do is, there's kind of a so what there. So at the very basic level, what that is, we use what we call a K coefficient, which is visitors plus referred visitors from their network. So if you acquire a customer, if you then encourage them to go and tell their friends about it, you can then start to, that's a basic member get member, basic social function. That's all well and good. What's really interesting about it is the data you can start to pull on that. Because, for example, if you bring in 1,000 visitors and they all, the cost per customer is £1, so a CPA of £1. If you've got an effective CPA if they bring in no other customers, bring in no other friends. But if they start to bring in, if 10%, they bring in 10% of them invite friends, then all of a sudden your effective CPA comes down. And as a marketeer, that matters. And that starts to flow down. If 20%, your effective CPA comes down even further. If it goes 1-to-1, then it halves your CPA. Now, by definition, that's viral. Now, the reality is, in 99% of cases, 99.9% of cases, you won't go viral. It's very rare for things to actually go viral. But if you can get a K coefficient of 0.1 or 0.2, then you've made all your marketing that much more effective and that much more efficient. And it's well worth going and doing. So moving on is, then we start talking about cross-platform. And this is a major issue for anyone that's marketing in this space, particularly people that have to market in the app ecosystem, the web ecosystem, the mobile web ecosystem. Then they're dealing with offline channels with call centers and retail. So typically we're structured in such a way in larger marketing departments where you have, you might have app to app. But really, then you've got the app ecosystem driving to web. You've then got, the web ecosystem driving to web, and the reverse is there. Now, that's actually manageable, say, in a mobile team. But then the reality is actually you're driving volume to the actual offline web. You're driving volume to call centres. You're driving volume to retail, whether you know it or not. And unfortunately, then you've got your other channels driving to web, to the mobile ecosystems, and you've got offline channels driving to mobile ecosystems. So you've got this kind of quite, a web of intrigue of the way that people can bounce between channels. And the fact that people are bouncing between channels is a very, very hard thing to track. And that's a big problem and in particular, marketing departments, digital marketing departments are structured often in silos. So all of a sudden the offline team may not be talking to the web team, and if there is a mobile team, they may not necessarily be talking. So all of a sudden they're going, well, I've got my number, I'm going to drive my number, and that's all I care about. But the reality is, as a consumer, is already working across it. They don't care. They just know, they expect on a smartphone, on a tablet, on a PC, over into a call centre, and often the expectations over even into the retail space, they think there should be all seamless and integrated. So actually, marketeers have quite a big opportunity and a challenge at the same time, because if we go and have a look at the benchmark group in terms of cross-platform integration, so linking between the two channels, linking between multiple channels, we're hovering well below 2. Everyone's hovering around often around the 1 mark. And people are only just starting to deal with it. And we see this as organisations evolve. They start with structure, then they start to get a strategy around it, and they evolve out. But no one's there. Again, if you could structure yourselves quickly and you could start to think about cross-channel integration, you've got a massive opportunity, again, to get ahead of everyone else, because the capabilities of most people out there aren't necessarily that strong in that area. I think, second to last slide, which talks about the fundamental shifts, is kind of related to the cross-channel, is actually the way consumers' expectations have changed is quite a big thing. So if we have a look at the then and the now, if we have a look at device, most people are used to working in a linear type fashion on the marketing side. So it's one device. It might be a PC marketing to a website that converts. It might be direct marketing operation driving to a call centre. But the reality is everyone now is using multiple devices. I personally roll with probably about 4 different devices, and most of you in this audience, I would expect you've got at least 2, if not more. So all of a sudden, the shifts in the way that people are behaving is different. So the big challenge is cross-platform tracking, of which there is currently no fantastic solution that is a silver bullet. There's a year or 2 of evolution before it gets bang on in that area, I think. But the way to solve that, the way to start to address that problem now, is defining use cases and defining cross-channel KPIs. Work out what KPIs are important, and once you understand what those KPIs are, then you can start to move towards the process of tracking it from a step-by-step basis. Speed. This is less the case because it's already been pretty fast, but whereas before people go and purchase and or interact, and the expectation is they'll get back to me in a couple of hours or a couple of days, depending on what your product is. Now it's instant. So to manage that, the challenge is to have a really good single data source, so you can make sure all your data sources are talking and integrating with each other. And the starting point for that is to do a data audit, understand where all your pots of data are. If you've got a mobile web data source and app data source, they're 2 totally separate things, which is different from your website, which is different from your call center databases. To be able to link those together is pretty key. Transaction, which is actually a big problem, whereas before everyone was trying to drive a subscription or a large high-value outlay. Web's all about the mobile web, and the mobile app ecosystem is all about micropayments. So it's small payments. Now, as a marketeer who has spent many, many years helping businesses drive volume, Marketing margin is one of the most important things. If they spend more money, that means you could spend more money to acquire that customer. So now that value's been driven down, there's a whole commercial plan of how to actually upgrade customers and how to get them to purchase more is vitally important. Consumption, the last point, which is also related to micropayments. People are moving towards one unit. So the classic example is in the music industry, where people used to buy albums, now they buy one track. Whereas people bought a whole subscription, for movies, now they're buying one movie. So they're moving from that, and that's a problem in itself, because most people, certainly to drive volume and to steal volume from other competitors, they'll go straight in with the one unit. They can drive customers and work in that area. But there's a whole product development plan that's needed to start to deal with something that's really actually not that sustainable. And just to conclude, look, I mean, the benchmark group shows it's pretty early days in mobile. There's a lot of opportunity to get ahead of the game. It's about understanding where you are in your stage of development, and then progressively and aggressively stepping up your marketing activities in those areas. I would advise start with pooled channels, the cheap channels, start to get them built up and then slowly scale that up. And as you start to scale that up, that goes well. I mean, there's arguments to go hard early, but then you've got to learn your lessons on conversion, you've got to learn your lessons on response rates, etc. You've got to start thinking about cross-platform right away. Cross-platform is the most important thing that happens in the mobile space at the moment. It's the problem that all the technology that's out there that people have been using for the last 5 to 10 years, cross-platform breaks that. So start to think about it and start to build use cases to understand how you unbreak it, because the spend that you push into the mobile space, if it doesn't have that connected up data, then the finance department won't give you more. And structure it. I mean, being a consultant, I'm going to say that, structure your planning. But there's the wise, structured planner will put a plan in place, will be successful at maybe half of it. But that's important. As long as you've got half of your plan in place and you'll be successful, you just realign your structure and your plan, and you can start to move ahead from there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Serge. We've run over in time a little bit, so if you have any questions for Serge, he'll be hanging around this area for the next sort of 5-10 minutes, so please come grab him if you have any questions. Thank you.